नमस्कार, मी दंतचिकित्सक डॉक्टर सुदर्शन गोरे. अ, आरो आरोग्यविषयक चर्चासत्रामध्ये नगर डॉक्टर सोसायटी आयोजित आरोग्यविषयक चर्चासत्रामध्ये आज या डॉक्टरांसाठी विशेष भागात मी आपल्या सर्वांचे स्वागत करतो. In this COVID era, we as a medical professional needs to know about the COVID-19 disease. Today we have our guest speaker, Dr. Pranali Tribhuke madam. She is MD and expertise in respiratory medicine. She is working as a consultant and interventional pulmonologist. As a COVID is a kind of respiratory and pulmonary disease. She will throw a deep light on the same subject. Dr. Pranali Trimukhe Madam is presently working in her own Trimukhe Heart and Chest Multispecialty Clinic, Market Yard, Ahmednagar. I hope that her knowledge in respective field will help us in our day-to-day medical practice to fight against Corona and COVID-19 disease. On behalf of all the medical fraternity, dental fraternity, and general practitioner and consultant, I would like to welcome Dr. Pranali Trimukhe Madam on this webinar on COVID-19 disease. Namaskar, Madam.
Namaste. Warm greetings to everyone, and I'm really grateful that you have given me opportunity to share my thoughts on COVID-19.
Ma'am, screen is all yours. You can start your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Then we are now coping with the COVID-19. So we'll have a quick look over the COVID-19 and the respiratory health facts. So starting with what is COVID-19? It is a coronaviral disease which has been emerged in 2019. The pathogen which is causing COVID disease is called as severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or we also known it as a novel coronavirus. This virus is one new member among the family of coronaviruses, which is characterized by RNA material, which is form the main genetic core of the virus, and which is covered by lipid bilayer, which constitute the membrane glycoprotein, spike proteins, and envelope glycoprotein. The coronavirus exists in the environment since many years, but the newer ones are always troublesome. There are 7 known strains of the coronaviruses, which can be subdivided into the alpha coronaviruses and beta coronaviruses. The beta coronaviruses are more pathogenic to the humans, which has been evident since last 2 decades. As severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, which caused the SARS in 2003, which was contacted from the infected civet cat and lead to the epidemic in the China. Whereas the another virus is Middle East respiratory syndrome virus, which caused the respiratory diseases and related morbidity and mortality in 2019, specifically in the Middle Eastern countries, and which were transmitted from the infected camels. Now the SARS coronavirus 2, which is the culprit pathogen of the recent pandemic, which is suspected to be transmitted from the seafood market from the Wuhan and spread across the globe. So how this transmission is occurring of this coronaviruses? The transmission is generally occurring by the aerosolized droplets, which are generated during the procedures like coughing, sneezing, breathing. Hence, the cough hygiene is very important in the preventive measures of the transmission of disease. A single cough or a single sneeze can produce 3,000 to 4,000 droplets, which can travel up to the 2 meters or 6 feet and can cover the that much area and lead to the transmission of diseases. So these airdrops, how they travel and causes the disease. These droplets either get transmitted directly or we acquire them after touching the infected surfaces, which is we call the indirect transmission of the disease. So what are the stages of COVID-19 spread? It has the 4 stages. The stage 1 is the case where any country get new cases from the international travelers. The stage 2 is the local transmission stage, where the people is coming in immediate contact with the infected person, are getting infections. But the more troublesome stage is the stage 3, which we call as a community transmission, where the person has no travel history and has contracted disease through the domestic source. That means the generation and the circulation of pathogen has been started in our own environment. And stage 4 is the epidemic of the disease. So these aerosolized droplets, which has viral particles, how exactly they are hampering our cells, how they are causing the disease. So as we see in the structures, the spike glycoproteins, the envelope glycoproteins, they have specific affinity to the various receptors which are present on the membrane of the cells. The main receptors through which they are acting on the human bodies are the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. While connecting these receptors, these viruses are able to transmit their genetic material into the human cells, where utilizing the human cells various protein synthesis apparatus, they multiply themselves and lead to the further disease. So what is the exact clinical presentation, or how a patient with COVID-19 will present? After acquiring the infection or coming in the contact with a definitive person with a disease, the incubation period, or that means the period of acquiring infection until the patient gets symptoms, it range from 2 to 14 days. And if we get the average, it is 5 to 5.5 days after the exposure. Generally, 95 percentile of the population who is get symptomatic. So what is the range of the disease? It can be ranged from a simple mild flu-like illness to a severe pneumonia, which can be causing death. The main symptoms which are seen are the fever, dry cough, shortness of breath, and myalgia. The case fatality in this COVID-19 pandemic is near 2.3 to 5%. 80% of the disease is mild to moderate disease. And only out of 1 patient from the 6 infected patient is likely to develop a severe acute respiratory disease. So the COVID positive is definitely not a death sentence. 80% of patients can safely come out of it. So for further segregation of patient and ease of the treatment, how can we segregate depending on their clinical features or symptomatology? The disease is generally divided into the 3 stages. The stage 1 is a mild, second stage is a moderate disease, and the third stage is with the severe disease. The mild diseases can be group A, which are asymptomatic, and patients are COVID positive definitely on RT-PCR testing. Group B are the symptomatic patients which are presenting with upper respiratory symptoms like fever, dry cough, but are without any morbidity. But the group C patient are symptomatic patients which are definitely presenting with the morbidities like obesity, who are elderly and having comorbidities like diabetes mellitus, hypertension, ischemic heart diseases, chronic lung diseases, having immunocompromised status, and like chronic kidney diseases. These patients can be treated easily and can be advised the isolation and home therapy. The moderate cases are further divided into the lower respiratory tract cases, among which those are without respiratory failure, where the pulmonary involvement is presenting without hypoxia. whereas the stage 2B are the moderate disease patients with pneumonia and having hypoxia, which are tend to develop respiratory failure. Whereas the severe form of the disease is always present with the lower respiratory tract infection, respiratory failure, multi-organ dysfunction, systemic hyperinflammation, and cytokine storm. So the clinical staging is very important to segregate the patient, to monitor and to prognosticate regarding the patient's health. Apart from the clinical features, there are various complications the coronavirus is causing. As it is primarily affecting the respiratory system, it is causing acute respiratory distress syndrome in approximately 22.5% of the patients. But apart from respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, nervous system are also getting affected. Generally, a typical COVID presentation, we can say, will be like acute cardiac injury with elevated cardiac enzyme status, myocardial ischemia, sudden cardiac arrest, and myocarditis. Whereas neural system nervous system involvement can be seen from normal mere giddiness up to the viral encephalitis. The other complications, the severe cases of COVID can be presented with the acute kidney injury, multi-organ failure, various thromboembolic phenomena like acute pulmonary embolism and deep venous thrombosis. So this is the range where we can see the COVID-19 patients being a merely asymptomatic or just upper respiratory tract infection up to the developing severe acute respiratory disease. So the most common symptoms which we are seeing in the COVID are overlapping with the other flu diseases and common cold. So how to differentiate them? It is very, very difficult to differentiate them on the basis of clinical scenario only. But if we take deep thorough history where there is a traveling history and patient is presenting with fever, cough, myalgia, we can or we should suspect such patients for COVID-19 in present scenario. So when to suspect a case, when we should advise the patient to get tested for COVID. So any symptomatic individual who has a history of international travel in last 14 days, all symptomatic contacts of a confirmed case, all symptomatic healthcare workers should definitely get tested, and they come under the zone of suspected cases. All hospitalized patients which are presenting with severe acute respiratory illnesses should be get tested with the RT-PCR test. And asymptomatic but direct and high risk contacts of confirmed cases, just like family members, they are the ideal candidates to get tested for COVID testing. The test should be done between the 5th and the 14 days after the contact, which will give us more possibility of proper viral load and proper testing results, or more reliable results, we can say. So what are the tests now we are saying that high risk group which we previously enlisted, and how they should get tested. So there are major two tests which we can see for the diagnostic purpose of the COVID-19 infection. The first one is the antigen detection or real-time polymerase chain reaction, in which the throat swab or nasopharyngeal swabs are utilized, and the sample is collected from the anterior pillar of the tonsil, pillar, posterior pharyngeal walls, and the uvula. Whereas the other test which also play an important role in the early diagnosis of the COVID-19 are the serological tests. The serological test can be performed with the help of ELISA, where immunoglobulins or the antibodies are formed against the coronaviral antigens, which are isolated and studied, can be utilized for the early diagnosis. Whereas in the real-time polymerase chain reaction, we use the specific gene sequencing or genome coding to detect the presence of viruses in the present sample or given sample. So what are the red flag signs? So when we should consider that a patient with COVID-19 might deteriorate or he might be advancing in the clinical staging. So these patients may present with leukopenia or leukocytosis. Neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio is more than 1:3 is the important predictor for the increase in the severity of the respiratory illnesses. Various inflammatory markers like C-reactive proteins, ferritin levels are also play important role in prognosticating and detecting the worsening of the condition of patient. Whereas the clinically, if we see resting tachycardia, resting tachypnea, patient presenting with hypoxia, are should consider as a red flag sign. When we see a radiological examination, initially the X-ray can be definitely normal, but sometimes if the patient is in advanced condition, they develop multilobar pneumonias, which can cover the multiple lobes and bilaterally. Whereas the CT guided images, the high resonance chest CT can present with the ground glass opacities, which were in subpleural distribution. This is the example of how the COVID high resonance CT plate will see. It will be showing a ground glass opacity, which is in subpleural distribution, affecting the multiple lobes and bilaterally. So what is the main pillar of the ongoing epidemic? To come out of the ongoing epidemic is the prevention. Prevention is of the infection is the main pillar of the current epidemic. So how can we prevent the transmission? The important is to prevent the transmission of a disease at a community level and to prevent the transmission of a disease in the hospital scenario. So starting with the prevention of community transmission of a disease, how to prevent the community transmission? It will be done by decreasing the contacts like no handshake, no hugs, maintaining the social distancing of about minimum 6 feet. Whenever it is possible, work from home plays important role in preventing the community transmission, avoiding the public gatherings, avoiding the crowded areas, maximum as possible as staying at home and performing hand hygiene are the important factors to prevent the community transmission. But what about the hospital scenario? So how should I practice in a pandemic? This is a dilemma in front of every one of us. So what care we can take? So from the patient's perspective, from doctor's perspective, and how to maintain the environment of our clinic is very important to know regarding the facts. So in case of patients, if it is possible, restrict the or limit the hours of the OPD. Avoid a walk-in patient as far as possible. Counsel every patient to take a time slot, previous appointment, and come during that time slot so that we can avoid the rush in the waiting area. If the patient is able to come alone, we should advise them to come alone. If not possible, let them accompanied by a relative. When the patients are coming specifically with a respiratory problem, it is very important to advise them to wear a mask and perform a cough and sneeze hygiene while waiting into the outside the consultation room. This is very important. From doctor's perspective, how a doctor can take care of himself while serving this ill patient. So we'll start from a simple thing. How do we sit in our consultation room? So the cross ventilation, are we in facing the cross ventilation flow? That will be the worst scenario because we'll be exposing more and more to the flowing droplets or generating droplets. But if we see the better scenario, when we are not in the direct flow of the air transmission or cross ventilation, which is happening across the room. The another important thing is the hand wash and hand rub hygiene. Every doctor should perform after every single patient examination. So there are standard protocols given by World Health Organization to limit the cross contamination of the infection and prevent the hospital-acquired transmission of diseases. And we should thoroughly follow the hand rub and hand wash hygiene. When to follow the hand rub and hand wash hygiene? They should be followed before touching any patient, before cleaning or doing aseptic precautions. If accidentally you came in contact with any bodily fluids of the patient after the end of examination of patient, if you are touching any surrounding materials, the hand hygiene should be performed. This is in the clinical scenario or while examining the patient. But hand hygiene is also important before preparing food, while taking food, or while coughing, blowing nose, sneezing, if we are touching garbage, or touching or had touched any soiled or infected mask or PPE. The hand hygiene performance is very important to prevent the contacting infection. So how can we take care of our clinic environment? So as a study has been seen in the New England Journal of Medicine, they says that SARS-CoV-2 virus can be detected in aerosols up to the 3 hours, on copper up to 4 hours, on cardboard up to 24 hours, and plastic and stainless steel at the end of 2 to 3 days. So we should identify the high touch surfaces in our clinics, just like the consultation table, the laptops, computers, notepads we are using, the basin, tap, doorknobs. These all are the high touch surfaces, and they should be taken care with a 1% of sodium hypochlorite or alcohol based cleansers, so that the sanitation can be maintained in a clinic room. Furthermore, we should all leave our stethoscope, knee hammers, and other medical stuff. We should not take them home. We can use only one pen, same phone, and disposable water bottles while working in a hospital. We should decontaminate our phone before going home. We can use minimum accessories like no watches, no rings, no bangles, and limitations on wearing other ornaments. While going home, we should decontaminate the car handles. So these are the basic precautions we should take care while taking care of ourselves and our patients. So now the role of PPE. Since the ongoing pandemic, there is very scarcity of the specific mask and personal protective equipment. So it is very important we use rationally and judicially. So there are guidelines for the rational use of personal protective equipment, which are issued by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. According to those guidelines, the triage areas in OPD or waiting rooms or in doctors in the consultation room, sanitary staff or staff working in the OPD scenario, it is must for them to use the N95 mask and glove. The minimum N95 mask and glove should be worn while working in such conditions. Whereas the patient who is presenting with a respiratory symptoms, it is also important for him to wear N95 mask. But the visitors who are accompanying the OPD patients or who are along with the IP patients, it is not necessary for them to wear N95 mask. It is suffice they can use the triple layer surgical mask. But the high risk zone is where we need to upgrade our PPE use, where we need to use the N95 mask, gloves, coveralls, goggles, head covers, and shoe covers. Everything is when while we are working in the critical care unit, we are working in a ward where the severely ill patients of severe acute respiratory illnesses are present, or while collecting the sample of the COVID-19 patients. So I guess these guidelines are very straightforward, very helpful, and directing us to when and whom should wear what level of protective equipment. So how to use this N95 mask? So there are 6 steps. The first is always starting with the hand hygiene. We should select a proper, well-fitting mask for according to our size. We hold the mask in front of us. Then wear the mask starting with the lower string before the below the level of ear, the upper string above the level of ear, the metal strip located above the nose should be gently pressed. And the most important step while wearing any respirator is to perform a fit check. We should take breathe in and breathe out and check whether air is leaking from anywhere. If the air is leaking, the mask will not be performed up to its mark. And as important as it is to put on the mask, the taking of the mask and disposal of it is also very important. While removing the mask, it should be removed from behind, should not touch the front area of the mask, and it should be discarded immediately in the bins which having closed lids, and should perform the hand hygiene following. Following the what is the donning and doffing procedure of the personal protective equipment, I'll enumerate in a quick way. First, we have to perform the hand hygiene, then put on the coveralls, put on the respirators and masks. Then we should put the eye protections in the form of goggles or protective shields, and put on the gloves. And after finishing the work, the doffing of the PPE should be done. Like we have to remove the gloves, perform a hand hygiene, wear another set of gloves so that we prevent ourselves from cross contamination. Remove the gown, then the eye protective devices, and then the mask, and should perform the hand hygiene at the end of the removal process. So this is the overlook how we can take care of ourselves, our environment and patient, and as well as the family members from getting the cross contaminated while working in the hospital scenario. There is another striking or a worrisome condition that is we are notifying, that is a severe acute respiratory illness. So what is severe acute respiratory illness actually? It is an acute condition which is characterized by diffuse lung injury where there is increase in permeability, severe initiation of the inflammatory cascade, which lead to the alveolar and capillary lining damage, lead to the collection of the fluid into the interstitium and alveoli, which increases the weight of the lung and decreases the proper ventilating area, so that patient gets severely breathless, is like drowning in its own secretions, and deteriorate its condition in few days. So what are the key components of any severe acute respiratory illnesses? The onset is always acute, that is happening within a 1 week or 7 days of a known insult. The presentation is the bilateral opacities with pulmonary edema, which are non-consistent or cannot be explained by cardiac failure or fluid overload, and the systemic hypoxia. Systemic hypoxia, that is partial pressure of oxygen and fraction of inhaled oxygen is less than 300, even at the external support of the breathing devices. So this is the severe acute respiratory illness. So why it is so important? It is important because the corona or the COVID-19 patients, they are some patients which are presenting with severe acute symptoms of them. So it is very important to differentiate among the COVID and non-COVID causes of the severe acute respiratory illnesses. So what are the non-COVID causes of severe acute respiratory illness? It can be sepsis caused by any infection or inhalation of harmful substances like aspiration or near drowning episodes, severe pneumonias affecting multiple lobes of the lung, severe trauma to head, chest, and which is followed by severe inflammatory reactions, other conditions like pancreatitis, massive blood transfusion, and burns, are the major causes of severe acute respiratory illnesses. While the acute exacerbation of existing chronic respiratory illnesses like uh, COPD or interstitial lung diseases should not be overlooked. Sometimes they can be fit into the criteria of severe acute respiratory illnesses and very much needed the isolation and the severe intensive treatment. So these are the non-COVID causes of severe acute respiratory illnesses. But how can we diagnose or know the patient of this novel coronavirus is presenting with a severe acute respiratory illnesses? So when the patient is presenting with a fever and a cough, which is acute onset, that is occurring within the last 10 days and requiring the hospitalization due to the dyspnea or hypoxemia, and any of the following are present. That is the history of known travel, international travel within the last 2 weeks, or patient who is a healthcare worker who is working in the SARI scenario, or uh, any condition or respiratory illness condition which is showing sudden deterioration of existing symptoms, or any disease which is taking unusual clinical course or odd disease despite of proper treatment. So these patients should be regarded or should be tested for uh, coronavirus. So when any kind of patient with any etiology is presenting with severe acute respiratory illnesses, it is must that we should isolate the patient, get him tested for the uh, RT-PCR testing, and if he is it is negative, then isolate them from the COVID positive patient. If it is a COVID positive patient, then we should follow the protocols of severe severity treatment of the COVID positive patients, which are multiple like oxygen supplementation or invasive mechanical supplementation and the various. So I would like to stop here. Thank you so much, and great grand salute to all healthcare warriors.
Thank you, madam. All very nice presentation. All points are has been covered very nicely. Some questions were asked on behalf of some general practitioners. Uh, I would like to ask some questions. Uh, how novel coronavirus emerges and why it has large impact on health, our health.
Okay. Any new virus when emerges, it has major 2 to 3 mechanisms. Importantly, when the coronaviruses which harbors among the animals as a normal flora, when those animals and humans come in a close contact, the transmission of such viruses occurs in the humans. That we call it is the spilling over of the virus. But the second phenomenon can be the mutation of genetic material of the virus itself, which upgrades its pathogenicity and invades the human cells. And any new virus affects health badly because our immune system is not ready for such a new antigen. It takes time to develop the immunity, to create a herd immunity and come out of infection. So it is hard for tackle the new viral infections in any scenario.
Right, madam. Next question is what care and specific precautions should be taken for a patient with pre-existing lung diseases?
So patients with pre-existing lung diseases like asthma, chronic obstructive lung diseases, interstitial lung diseases, they should continue their regular treatment. Generally, we see non-compliance among the inhalational therapy, but they should not discontinue the inhalational therapy in such pandemic conditions where the other viral circulation has been increased. Second is that they should avoid the contact with any ill patient, even though among the family members. They should keep the minimum contact outside, avoid the crowded places, should carefully maintain the hand hygiene, and from the point of family members, those patients who are already suffering from respiratory diseases are more worrisome among such pandemic time. So they should be given some psychological support, and advice from the consulting doctor should be sought time to time.
Definitely, madam. Next questions are about symptomatic treatments of COVID-19. Is hydroxychloroquine is efficient agent against COVID-19 virus, and any new specific treatment research has been developed to fight against coronavirus?
The coronavirus is very new to everyone, for the whole world. It's been last minimum 6 months we are facing it in the scenario. So yet a definitive treatment or a definitive vaccine is yet to emerge. But there are many clinical trials are going on, and basis of those clinical trials, we are starting, or the government is issuing the treatment guidelines. So regarding the hydroxychloroquine, it is a immunomodulator which is generally used in case of immunological manifestation in rheumatoid conditions. According to the Indian Council of Medical Research, the hydroxychloroquine has been advised to use prophylactically, but the trials which are supporting these are in minimal number. A much larger number trials are ongoing, so we cannot say that it must be used. But the patient in positive or the asymptomatic persons in the contact with definitive cases can be given trial with the hydroxychloroquine. While as the specific antiviral treatments are remdesivir or favipiravir are about emerging. They have played a significant role in the previous SARS-1 and Middle Eastern respiratory disease pandemic. So they can be given a trial.
Okay. And then, ma'am, what about BCG vaccine? It is also trial.
BCG vaccine, it is they say that it can provide a partial immunity, but anything to say with a confirmation is too early now.
Okay. My next question is what is the difference between normal mask, that is surgical 3-layer mask we are using, and respirator?
Basically, the 3-layer surgical mask which we are using, they are not protective devices, or they are not certified from the Occupational Safety and Hazard Institutes as a protective devices. They are used for the one-way protection, that is to avoid the splash of fluids, spitting, air drops from outside, which are generally used during the medical practices. They are made from the non-woven material, but they cannot prevent the transmission of viral particles. But whereas the respirators, they are always made with a specific standard, which are can be categorized depending upon their filtration capacity, that is FFP1, 2, 3, which says that their capacity to filter the microns which are less than 0.3 micron size particles, which generally the viruses are. The FFP1 is 80%, FFP2 levels are around 94 to 95%, whereas FFP3 is near 99% of the efficacy it shows while filtering the those microparticles. So they can be used during the occupational where micro dust and various hazardous fumes are produced, or importantly during the airborne disease pandemic, they play a major role.
Okay, next questions are about say community or patient education. What are the major myth busters for public awareness in COVID-19 area?
Starting with the food, as we have seen the COVID can stay on various substances for a duration of various duration of time, but it cannot cause the infection while during entering the food. But we should perform proper cleaning. At least we can wash it with salt water or normal water before utilizing those vegetables. The another is the specific food items like coffee or garlic. or anything up to that matter, yet not been confirmed can prevent or treat the disease. So a proper balanced diet, well hydration should be maintained rather than following any myth. The second is the spraying of the sodium hypochlorite or bleach. The spraying on the body has not played a major role. It has a major role while cleaning the surfaces.
Okay, ma'am. And what are the do's and don'ts for stepping outside after lockdown opens?
The major challenge of all our patients is once the lockdown has been will be completely removed. So we should definitely allow the crowded places as much as possible. Public gatherings should be avoided. Uh, we should cover our nose and mouth while performing. Coughing or sneezing is very important. While working scenarios, we should make sure that we are at adequate distance. Minimum 1 meter of distance is there between the two colleagues while working on a table or in a closed working scenarios is very important. That we should not neglect these all precautions once we are out of the lockdown. Otherwise, there can be chances of the second cycle of the infection.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, we are also having two of our dental colleagues, two of our doctor colleagues with us. First is Dr. Mahesh Kokate, general practitioner and consultant, and second is Dr. Amol Khandwe sir, exercise consultant. They will ask question. Firstly, Dr. Mahesh Kokate will ask question about their queries and about COVID-19.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you, madam, for giving such a beautiful lecture about COVID-19. I am Dr. Mahesh Kokate. I am a general practitioner and a homeopathic practitioner. Actually, Sir Sudarshan sir asked many questions. In that question, many answer. मतलब मला हे म्हणायचं होतं की मला त्यांनी जे प्रश्न विचारले त्याच्यामध्ये सगळे उत्तर बरेच उत्तर मला मिळाले अपेक्षित पाहिजे होते ते. परंतु माझा एक क्वेश्चन आहे मॅडम की आपण जनरल प्रॅक्टिस करत असताना इतके टूल्स आपल्याकडे अवेलेबल नसतात क्लिनिक म्हणजे ओपीडी वर किंवा ग्रामीण भागात किंवा रुरल एरियामध्ये. इन माय प्रॅक्टिस देर इज not many tools which can give the suspected cases or diagnose the suspected cases. In that such a condition, CBC or and pulse oximeter the means अपना ते पोर्टेबल पल्स ऑक्सिमीटर माझ्या क्लिनिक मध्ये आहे. तर त्याचं आणि कम्प्लीट ब्लड काउंट आपण चेक केल्यानंतर ते किती युजफुल आपल्याला येऊ शकतं किंवा त्याचा आपण कितपत त्याच्यामध्ये यूज करू शकतो किंवा त्याच्याने काही गाईडलाईन मिळू शकते का, हे माझा प्रश्न होता. आणि टेम्परेचरच्या बाबतीत पण की थर्मामीटर मध्ये आपण चेक केलं टेम्परेचर तर कितपत त्याची रेंज असू शकते किंवा SpO2 मध्ये आपण O2 सॅच्युरेशन पाहिलं तर ते कितपत असतं. ऍक्च्युली तुम्ही सांगितलं माइल्ड केसेस, मॉडरेट केसेस आणि सिव्हिअर केसेस. तर त्यातल्या पण आपण कोणत्या केसेसचा आपण डायग्नोसिस करण्यासाठी त्या टूलचा यूज करू शकतो, असं जर काही आयडिया असेल तर समजलं तर बरं होईल.
आता आपल्याकडे जे क्लिनिक मध्ये अवेलेबल असणारे पल्स ऑक्सिमीटर किंवा थर्मामीटर्स आहेत हे डेफिनेटिव्ह डायग्नोसिस आपल्याला देऊ शकत नाही. यांच्या मदतीने आणि हिस्ट्री आणि आपलं क्लिनिकल एक्झामिनेशन याच्या मदतीने आपण पेशंट कॅटेगराईज नक्की करू शकतो की एखादा पेशंट कॉमन कोल्डचा आहे, फ्लू लाईक सिम्पटम आहे, अशा पेशंटचं आपण सॅच्युरेशन आणि टेम्परेचर जर रेकॉर्ड केलं आणि सॅच्युरेशन जनरली जर 90% पेक्षा कमी असेल तर डेफिनेटली असा पेशंट रेस्पिरेटरी डिस्ट्रेस डेव्हलप होण्याचा पोटेन्शियल कॅन्डिडेट असू शकतो. त्यामुळे असा पेशंट अंडर मॉनिटरिंग ठेवणे किंवा पेशंटला एज्युकेट करणं हे गरजेचं आहे की जर सिम्पटम्स वाढले किंवा पेशंटचा ब्रेथलेसनेस जर डेव्हलप झाला आहे तर त्यांनी अगेन फॉलोअप साठी येणं किंवा अशा पेशंटला फर्दर रेफरल देणं हे खूप गरजेचं आहे.
म्हणजे आज तुम्ही सांगितल्याप्रमाणे इट्स ए रेड फ्लॅग साईन, म्हणजे त्या तो पेशंट रेड फ्लॅग साईन मध्ये जाऊ शकतो आहे
हो,
आपण.
आणि जो
बोला,
जो पेशंट रेड फ्लॅग साईन मध्ये आहे तो पेशंट डेफिनेटली आयसोलेशन किंवा क्वारंटाईन साठी आयडियल कॅन्डिडेट आहे. असा पेशंट जर फर्दर डिटोरिएट होत असेल तर त्यांची कोविड टेस्टिंगला आपण त्यांना ऍडवाइस करू शकतो. पण प्रायमरी वी शुड स्टार्ट देम विथ होम आयसोलेशन अँड क्वारंटाईन, प्रॉपर सिम्टमॅटिक treatment. If we can see the further deterioration is there, we should definitely refer them because it can be due to non-COVID panic.
Non-COVID. Okay. Thank you, madam. Question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Kokate, sir. Ma'am, next question will be asked by Dr. Khandwe, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Sir, येतोय आवाज तुमचा.
Thank you, ma'am, for your detailed session. Almost all aspects you have covered. Just I want to ask one question, and that is, can we reuse the N95 mask, as there is a scarcity of that mask? So can we reuse them?
To reuse the N95 mask, there is a ongoing study which uses the hydrogen peroxide vapor to sterilize or disinfect those masks which has been used in COVID positive scenario. And the use or efficacy of hydrogen peroxide vapors is very much promising, but availability of such facilities is very difficult at the periphery level where we are practicing. And the another important thing is to use any respirator. Apart from disinfection, the proper fitting is also important criteria. While reusing, the mask should be adequately fit. The leak should not be there. That also plays important role. So microbiological and structural, both criteria are need to be fulfilled while reusing any respirator, let's say N95 mask.
Okay. My second question is about asymptomatic patients, or rather than patient, I will say about myself. If I am a asymptomatic carrier and I go to my home, the fear comes that I may infect my parents or my other family members. So should I consider isolating myself from the common places in the home, inside my home?
First thing is, if you are a asymptomatic carrier, it should be get confirmed after a testing.
Yeah.
If you are tested positive, then definitely you are a candidate for self-isolation. While performing a self-isolation, you should be in a separate room from your family. The clothing and daily utensils are better to be kept separated, and you should definitely avoid meeting the other people unless the second or the next test, which is will be performed on RT-PCR, will come negative.
Okay. So almost all the topics you have covered. So just one question, it is about the inhalational steroids. Should we continue them, or is it okay to stop them?
Inhalational steroids, generally what we prescribe in asthmatic cases or patients, they are in microgram dosage. So the effect of their systemic circulation and affecting the immunity during the viral pandemic is really questionable. So we have to compare how much positive effect or the immunity is going to affect due to the inhalational steroid. So if we stop such inhalational steroid, which is important to keep the patient asymptomatic. If the withdrawal of such steroid will be leading to the acute exacerbation of pre-existing diseases, then definitely it is not recommended.
And what about the oral steroids?
Oral steroids are used in very specific conditions like rheumatological and post-transplant and everything. So those patients are high-risk patients, and they should be isolated, or they should be home quarantined. They should avoid the public places, and they should not stop the steroid dose immediately, because the withdrawal will also affect their health. So if they are in tapering mode, they can consult with their doctor, and accordingly weighing the benefits and disadvantage of the use of steroid in particular case, we have to weigh. The use of steroids, whether it is inhalational or systemic, we have to weigh the plus and minus point for each individual separately. We cannot generalize or statement for all the patients which are in immunomodulators or which are in immunocompromised condition due to the steroid.
I'm done with it. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, ma'am. I think all questions and queries of there has been satisfied. Madam, thank you, Dr. Kokati sir and Khadwe sir. Madam, my next question is about dentistry and dentist. As a dentist, we are at the highest risk of getting COVID-19 because we work in the patient's mouth. And during our procedures, the aerosols and spatters are produced. So what kind of precautions we should take as a dentist to practice in our day-to-day life?
So when any healthcare worker is working, or specifically can say dentist or oral surgeons, ENT surgeons, who are in a close proximity with the airways and the oral cavities, we should consider some factors that what kind of procedures are going to be performed, whether it is like a intubation, it is a bronchoscopy, or they're going to be used any energy devices like drills or suctions or cauteries, because the use of such energy devices will amplify the generation of the aerosol particles, the proximity with the patient, and the duration of procedures to be performed. So as if there is more use of the energy devices, more is the proximity, and the procedure durations are prolonged, there is high risk of transmission of the diseases if the patient is a carrier or even though asymptomatic carrier or a positive patient. So the advice to work in such a scenario that the use of personal protective equipment is very much important, such that they can be advised to use the respirators which are with a high efficacy than N95. We can advise them to use the N99 or N100 respirators, which has high efficacy. The other personal equipments like fitting goggles and the face shields should be added with the effective respirator. And furthermore, when we are at the risk of any airborne infections, the controls generally which are used, like use of a negative pressure rooms or high efficacy particle air filters, they can be used in such scenario to prevent the cross infection or minimize the transmission of the droplet particles or aerosols in the working environment.
Okay, ma'am. And what about air conditioners or ACs we using in our clinic or in our operatory or in our checkup area?
In rooms or conditions where patients are more likely to generate the aerosols, the air conditions are better to be avoided, because the filters can harbor virus and many other bacterial infections in that matter. If they are being well maintained, then it is okay. But at the peak of pandemic, they should be avoided till the number of positive cases are high. There is no evidence of or there is little herd immunity is being developed. So such factors which can be a potential harm, while to all health workers and patients should be avoided.
Okay. And next question is, are there any oral symptoms and oral signs in oral cavity? So dentist can identify or relate to COVID-19 patient.
Uh, Not specifically the oral signs which can we see and predict the presence of COVID-19, but there is ongoing study in the San Diego in a ENT department or their university. They say that apart from the fever, malaise, cough, and dyspnea, the loss of taste and loss of smell are also the emerging new symptoms, which can help us to direct our suspicion towards the COVID-19.
Okay.
So the upcoming time and the more and more research will let us know how definitely we can make the diagnosis on the basis of clinical scenarios.
Okay, ma'am. I would like to come to end. Very nice and elaborative question and answer session also, and very nice presentation. I would like to thanks Dr. Pranali Trimukhe Madam on behalf of Nagar Doctor Society for such a valuable and useful information and knowledge sharing with us. It will definitely help us and help all dental and medical professional and all general practitioner and consultant for their day-to-day medical practice. Thank you, madam, for such a great presentation and such great participation in this program. I would also like to thank Dr. Mahesh Kokate and Dr. Khandwe sir for their queries and their questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day.